Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction.
You and I have a rendezvous with destiny.
You know what time it is, so sit back and get ready for the Stafford Voice, your dose of conservative in a world of liberal.
3, 2, 1.
Hey! What up, what up, what up? I'm your host, Daniel Stafford, and you are listening to the Stafford Voice, where we are conservative in a world of liberal. That's right. Tonight, we've got some stuff to cover. We've got the bottom line. We're going to cover the reason for the Second Amendment. We're going to fix the VA once and for all? Question mark. Maybe we'll get to some Dakota Access pipeline facts that we are or aren't supposed to know. I don't know. I mean, it's just kind of common sense. We've also got some profiles in history. So, I want to remind you, before we get started, that there are many ways to listen. Whether it's tune in, you're watching on the YouTubes live right now, or you watch the replay. Set this channel as a favorite. Whatever you do, so you don't get left behind, because if for some strange, crazy reason you do miss the show, you'll be able to catch a replay, so just sit tight. There is no need to panic, because, hey, I've got you. In the case you aren't already following on social media, you can do so over on the Twitters or on Gab. If you haven't gotten over to Gab, you need to do so. It's like Twitter, but 100 times better. And quite frankly, I say that a little tongue-in-cheek because I suck at social media. I just absolutely really don't do much of it at all, like I should. It's my weakness, my kryptonite, I guess you could say. Anyway, find me over on the Twitters or on Gab at Stafford Voice, or if you need a little more than 140 or so characters to say what you need to say, jump over to Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever it is. Wherever you are, all you got to do is just search for the Stafford Voice, and more than likely we're going to be there. Okay, so let's get into this, shall we? The bottom line. Each one of us has our own struggles, day in and day out. Speaking for myself, I've got enough going on in my head to keep even the brightest of psychologists and psychiatrists busy for days. So I mainly keep to myself and my very tight inner circle. I don't bother getting wrapped up in other people's business. I understand that would be only harmful to myself. And I work on perfecting myself every day, and let me tell you, I got a long way to go. So, in my opinion, I think that one of our problems in society is that we are over-connected. We feel a need to meddle in other people's problems. Sounds odd coming from a guy who spends his weekend with his wife with a camera in their face, taking you along for the journey. But I'm going to be honest, as much as we enjoy doing that and being open so you know in a more intimate way who you're watching or listening to, I do it for myself. We do it for ourselves. We do it so that one day we'll be able to look back and see where we were on this journey called life. You know, we document our life. So what I'm trying to say is that when you log into your favorite social media site, remember that there is a real person on the other end. We've become so accustomed to just blurting things out that we forget someone real is receiving what we sling their way. I get it. It would be so easy to pick up your phone and pound out a tweet eviscerating that crazed liberal lunatic on the screen. But that doesn't do anything. Damages any shred of character you thought you had. It doesn't promote unity, the very thing we need most. Now, while you might think that or not, we are in some very dark days, and I fear they will become darker in the near future. And too many people jump to a conclusion before gathering all of the facts. We think we have it all figured out, and the fact of the matter is we are just as clueless as the next guy. The thing we should be focused on is ourself, and if we're progressing. We've spent the last 8 years tearing each other apart, ruining friendships, dividing families. We stand in desperate need of healing, individually and as a nation. I feel like a broken record at times for repeating what Thomas Paine said when he said, quote, "These are the times that try men's souls." And friends, we are in trying and troubling times. But are we willing to recognize it for ourselves and admit it? Are we willing to put in the work on ourselves? We can't change the next person. In fact, the only person we can change, ourselves. We can't wait any longer. We have to start here, and we have to start now. Only then can we be willing to heal and unify ourselves and as a nation. And that is the bottom line. Ugh, ugh, ugh. Now, listen, I realized that was really just a mind dump. And I want to invite you to join us in the chat room. We've got, believe it or not, 2 chat rooms. We've got the klrnradio.com/chat, I think is what it is. Wow, I don't have it up on my screen. I apologize. But you can go over to klrn.com and you can find the chat over there. Also, if you're watching, I'm sorry. This is the best I've got. But over on the YouTubes, if you're streaming over on the YouTubes, jump into the chat, give me a shout, let me know that you're there and you're watching. But I want to give a special shout out to some really good friends of mine, Rebel Road Tactical and his wife Tina. Many of you guys knew him, and I say that in the past tense, on Twitter, at Slickery Trigger. And really, he was on my mind when I was kind of dumping some thoughts out in regards to the bottom line tonight. And that's because a lot of people get a lot of crap on social media. I particularly don't. I don't get a lot of it at all. I've got one guy that kind of likes to sling stuff my way every now and then. And really, the guy is he's a nice guy and an incredible photographer. I love looking at the pictures that he takes and posts on Facebook. His name's Andy. He's kind of a left-leaning guy, but he keeps it civil. And I have a lot of respect for him, for that, because he keeps it civil. And I mean, he tweets me at the dark hours of night, and at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, I finally respond, and it doesn't bother him at all. He doesn't send nasty tweets, "Hey, why aren't you responding to me? Why aren't you responding?" He makes a comment, waits for a response. He gathers his facts. I gather mine. Together, we have come to an agreement that we will probably never completely agree on any one topic, but it invites civil conversation. And that's what we really need to be working on as a nation, and that is civil conversation. Far too many people have forgotten, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that there's another person on the other end. It's just like if back in the days when you used to pick the phone up and you would call someone and hear a voice on the other end. And there's an app out there called Anchor, and that's one of the things that I like about Anchor is It's like you're talking on a phone. It's like Twitter with a voice. You don't really tweet what you're going to say, you say it. And here I am talking about an app that I hardly use. But when I use it, I love it. Because you hear the person. You hear it. It's very, very civil. Unlike Twitter. Twitter gets extremely nasty. And unfortunately, Slickery Trigger was one of the guys that, and I applaud him for it, for throwing in the towel, because I've seen some of the crap that guy dealt with on Twitter. And mainly it's just because he's opinionated. He says what he wants to say, and he feels strongly about what he says. And some liberal lunatic, some liberal loon, decides to jump in and start getting nasty. And they never would sit down and try and be civil with him. It was their way or no way at all. And then they start resorting to calling him names. And it just got to the point to where if I was him, I would have thrown the towel in a long time ago. The guy's got way more patience than I do. I don't have a lot of patience for social media, and that's why I pretty much stay away. I mean, it's there for the show, and if you want to reach out and for me to be able to share information, but for the most part, if you're civil, I'll chat with you. If not, screw you. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to fall into the trap. But let me go back to what initially brought me onto this, and that's because he said healing begins inside, and that's you as the individual, then at home, then in the community. And I completely 100% agree with that. You can't fix anything at home. You can't even begin to work on things at home until you begin to work on yourself. Then, and only then, will the things in your home start falling into place. 9.5 times out of 10, the problem is you. When you finally admit it, and admit to yourself that you're the problem, and you start working on yourself, and instead of trying to fix everybody else, oh my God, it's so much easier. Things get so less complicated. And then once you finally have things going in the right direction for yourself and for your home, then you can start branching out and trying to build a community. You can't just jump out there and go door to door and say, hey, you're doing this wrong. You need to vote for this guy, or you need to take this stance. It doesn't work that way. You have to promote a civil conversation. Work on yourself first. It's all about at church we hear the phrase self-mastery all the time. And I tell the kids in my class that I teach all the time, self-mastery. Work on yourself. I don't go out... when my wife does something that annoys me, I don't correct her. Because that's who she is. I don't worry about it. I work on myself. Did I do something that caused her to do that? Maybe she doesn't even know that it might annoy me. But who cares? Honestly, I don't care at all. There are far more... the list is so long of the things that I have to work on for myself. The last thing on my mind is trying to figure out how to, quote unquote, fix my wife. She's so far above me right now in my eyes, and she's like shaking her head no, but she completely disagrees with me on that. But my wife is light years ahead of me, and she is such a good example. She keeps me in check all the time. And I just get so sick of the people out there who want to tear a person down instead of building that person up. I came to the realization months ago that, and if you're a longtime listener to the show, I used to talk about changing hearts and minds. I came to the realization a long time ago, months ago, that that's probably not going to happen. It is completely out of my control to go out and try and change people's hearts and change people's minds. The only thing I can do is present the facts as best that I can, let them come to their own conclusion, and then see where we can come to some middle ground. And I hope that I'm making sense with all of this, but it's things sometimes get really complicated, and it's really, really hard to explain it. But really, what it comes down to is self-mastery, and that is working on yourself. And I see what Slick and Tina. I'm sorry. It's so hard for me to get away from calling you Slick. So whatever I'm still gonna probably just call you Slick. It's just what I know you as. It's who I've come to know you as. But Slick, I understand exactly what you're saying. For the most part, most men always marry above their own selves. I don't have everything together. I mean, a lot of people think that I do. My wife thinks I have things together, but really, I'm nothing without her. But yes, Slick, both of us are extremely fortunate. And Tina, thank you. Tina says that my wife is a good wife. I have to agree. She's incredible. I'm so fortunate and so thankful. And by the way, I neglected to mention earlier at the start of the show that I had a fantastic Thanksgiving. I don't know about you guys, but I had, and I think I can speak for my wife when I say this, but we had a fantastic Thanksgiving. The smoked turkey that we got from some really good friends of ours over at Crazy Good Eats, local barbecue place. They smoked some turkeys, and we were fortunate enough to get one. They did an incredible job on it. My wife didn't have to be in and out of the oven basting the turkey all day. I mean, she had a relatively relaxing day. But, I mean, she was cooking her little heart out with all of the side dishes. But she did a phenomenal job. We had 2 rounds of dessert, as always. I took it nice and slow with the first plate, the main course. About an hour and a half later is when dessert 1 began, and then about another hour and a half later, dessert round 2 for dessert came, and that was 4 different slices of pie. Oh, I paid for it over the weekend when I went for a bike ride, and wow, it was bitterly cold. If you guys do follow the vlog and you happens to watch that, I'm not joking, it was freezing out. I mean, 34 degrees isn't that bad, but when you're on a bike and you're cruising at about 10 miles an hour or so, huffing and puffing because you had way too much to eat, brr. Anyway, we've got to get into some of this stuff. Let's see. Tina, I'm so glad you got to see both of the kids and some of the grandkids. That's awesome. I did. It was cold, Jessica. Jess, it was freezing. Thanks for watching. Slick says he's not the only one with pie. Yes, I had 4 different slices of pie. We had a chocolate French silk pie. We had some German chocolate pie, which was phenomenal. I got to get my wife to make that one again. It was good. We had a coconut cream pie and my fave, pumpkin pie, which I finished off the other half to the pumpkin pie last night. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I realize I'm on a diet. I've been doing really good. Really good. The last couple of days I vegged out. No big deal. I hit the gym really good, really hard. Earlier, we had I had a deadlift session, and I'm sitting here peeling some of the skin, the calluses off my hands. But anyway. Okay, let's actually get into some of this show stuff, shall we? Where are we going to start at? The reason for the Second Amendment. Slick, this is right up your alley. I know you're going to love this. But the reason for the Second Amendment, and I'm talking about this because when I started thinking about what I was going to talk about on the show, I reached out to one of my guys in my accountability group, and many of you guys know him, at Army John on the Twitters. I told him I really wasn't motivated at all, and I didn't know what to talk about. So he said, well, talk about the Second Amendment. That's easy. So let's talk about why. Why do we have a Second Amendment? Well, it supports the First, meaning this. So first off, you have to know what the First Amendment is, and that is that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Okay. Slick, you nailed it right on the head. The reason for the Second Amendment is to make it possible for us to have the means to put down tyranny. And look, our first level of defense is what? The First Amendment. The First Amendment gives us the right to say whatever we want. We have the right to free speech. Do we not? We do. We have the right to peaceably assemble. Okay? And we see, well, for the most part, we see that over on Standing Rock or Sit Down Rock or whatever it is. But how do you enforce that? How do you enforce it? How do you guarantee that right? With the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment says a well-regulated militia, and leftist people are going to argue this however they want, but a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The Second Amendment supports the First Amendment. You can't have one without the other. And I see Army John jumping in. I want to go back to something that he touched on, and that was, he laid it out in a way that I'd never really, he put it in kind of an equation, per se. And Army John, throw this up in the chat, where he said that the reason was tyranny in the spectrum of force. Spectrum of force equals PR. So, and PR basically, the meaning behind PR is power of resistance. He says that the power of resistance equals the means times the will. So if either means or access to guns or will go to zero, then so does the power of resistance. Again, hammer, nail on the head. If you don't have guns, then you have no way to protect anything. And I see that you piped it up there earlier, and I totally skipped over it, John. I apologize for that. But the power of resistance equals the means times the will. Fascinating. I gotta hand it to Army John. Completely makes sense that if the means or the will goes to so think about this in a mathematical type way. So if you have a high will in order to protect something, but you have absolutely no means to do that, meaning you have no arms, so you're at zero. So if your level of will is at a 10, but your means is at a 0 because you don't have a way to protect yourself, get this. 10 times 0 is 0. So you have no power. So your power of resistance is nil. It just blew my mind as I was reading what he was saying earlier. Oh, so there is a reason we have the Second Amendment. There is a reason. Oh, YouTube made him watch an entire soap commercial of Dove soap. Sorry, John, that's hilarious. Anyway, okay, you know what? I'm looking at the time, and we probably need to do a break. And when we come back, speaking of commercial breaks, sorry, John, I should have timed that a little better, I guess. But when we come back, let's talk about fixing the VA once and for all, shall we? I mean, this is just one idea that's out there. Just one. So when we come back, we will talk about fixing the VA once and for all. We'll be right back.
You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
Nothing will protect you quite like your sidearm, so why not give it the protection it deserves? Something as strong as the Second Amendment and stands the test of time, and better yet, made in the USA. A Rebel Road Tactical Custom Kydex holster is that and more. Call now and place your order with Rebel Road Tactical at 682-217-4579. Again, 682-217-4579, or online at rebelroadtactical.com.
Conservative in a world of liberal.
The Stafford Voice.
Okay, we're back. I am your host. That's right, Daniel Stafford, host of the Stafford Voice. Okay, fixing the VA once and for all. Yeah, about that. I stumbled on this over the weekend. It was a post that came through from militarytimes.com. So, sorry, I'm just trying to pay attention to the YouTube chat. Army John is thanking YouTube for interrupting the show with a soap commercial, Dove soap. Maybe they're trying to tell you you're dirty from, anyway, you know what I'm talking about being out on drill. Let's see, fixing the VA requires one sapper and a boatload of high explosives, that's right. Again, invent a soap, butt soap, and make the CEO of YouTube watch it over and over. Actually, that sounds hilarious. Let's make it 2 sappers. They like to work in pairs. Yeah, for the most part, but I think most of us would rather just be left alone. The last thing we want is somebody next to us nagging at us to hurry up and take apart the mine or string the explosives together. Anyway, speaking of explosives, this whole VA thing needs to, the whole thing just needs to explode. I'm getting tired of talking about it. But we've got to do something about it. And again, I stumbled upon this. One has a left hand, the other has a right hand. Get the job done. I stumbled on this article from militarytimes.com. And here's what really caught me. Here's how they start this out. A health policy expert at the Libertarian Cato Institute is offering a radical idea to help reform the Department of VA, Department of Veteran Affairs, and prevent future wars at the same time. Huh? So this was the idea. Make troops and veterans pay for their own medical insurance. What? So I read on. In an online essay last week, Institute Director of Health Policy Studies Michael Cannon, over at the Cato Institute, recommends dropping the idea of free health care for veterans and instead offering better pay for current troops and vouchers for current veterans to buy their own coverage on the open market. Now, he argues that since the government would have to front the costs for insurance and vouchers, it would also make the costs of war clearer before the first shots are fired. Sometimes I just don't get libertarians. I just sometimes I think people are too smart for their own good. But anyway, so in his post he wrote, quote, "Veterans' benefits are one of the largest financial costs of any armed conflict, yet Congress does not pre-fund those obligations. It only funds them once they come due." I get that. And Army John says, Hillary Care back in 94 was to have troops pay for their own health care. An E4's entire annual salary would barely cover private health care. So true. I mean, speaking for myself and for our family, our health care basically doubled this year. And that was right before we got a letter from our policyholder that said, we're kicking you off because we're getting out of the whole Obamacare thing anyway. So, sucks to be you. So, yes, I've been where an E4's salary would be. You're going to have to basically double or even triple the amount that you pay a veteran or a troop so they can pay for their own health care. Anyway, so let's go on to what he was saying, what he continued to say in the article. He says, quote, "In the event of war, the added risk of deaths and injuries would cause premiums to rise, which would increase the amount of added pay Congress must provide each service member. The result is that future Congresses and presidents would have to confront this enormous cost of war at the moment they decide to send U.S. troops off to war, and every day they decide to keep them there." So what is Cannon's proposal? And he's got 3 points. First, the federal government should increase military pay sufficient to enable workers to purchase from private insurers at actuarially fair rates a package of life, disability, and health benefits equivalent to what the VA provides. I'm going to stop right there, which is basically nothing, because we've covered this before. Continuing on. Benefits would kick in as soon as they leave active duty and cover veterans' service-related disabilities or illnesses for life. The costs of that would be astronomical. Second, Having privatized the insurance component of veterans benefits, the federal government should then privatize the delivery component. It should incorporate the VA as a private company and issue shares to active duty personnel and veterans based on length of service or other criteria. You read that right. Military personnel and veterans would literally own the VA, including its many hospitals and other facilities. Privatizing the VA would both increase the pay of active duty personnel and create a massive wealth transfer to active duty personnel and veterans. Like the government would actually let that happen. Oh, where did we leave off this ridiculous thought? Veterans would be able to receive medical care from health systems owned and operated by veterans for veterans. Sounds great, but we know what happens when the government gets involved in healthcare. Do we not? Bueller. Okay, third and final, the federal government should give current veterans vouchers to purchase insurance and medical care from the insurers and health systems of their choice, including the new veteran-owned and operated systems. Okay. Paul Rykov, founder and CEO of IAVA, Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, is skeptical. He says veterans are, quote, used to big promises and disappointing results. That fixing the VA might be one of the biggest challenges for President Trump. Every president says they're going to do it, yet we've still got a VA with backlogs and massive problems. Yes, the VA... let me jump over to the chat. I'll lead up to that, John. Let's see. I love it when well-paid members of Congress with 100% medical coverage debate the cost of measly benefits active duty soldiers get with increasing personal expenses. That's completely true. I mean, it costs a lot to be a soldier. Let's see. Slick says, oh, hey, I have an idea. How about we stop going to war with everyone who doesn't do what we tell them? I mean, we could do that. I think we need to focus on things here at home, but then again, that goes back to what we were saying earlier in the show, focusing on ourselves instead of going out and trying to nation build. These people have lived their lives that way for thousands and thousands of years. We're not going to be able to come in one day and say, hey, here's a taste of freedom. America. It's not going to work. Let's see. This will never happen. Once government power takes over something, they never relinquish that power without bloodshed. Completely agree. Army John, let's see. John goes over and says VA is broke because they have to pay to chop off PFC Chelsea Manning's nuts off and sew her a new vagina. Wow. John, that's feeding it to him like he's never done before. Let's see. Jess says government involved in healthcare is the epitome of a, quote, good idea fairy. Yes. I could fix Chelsea's problem in about 5 minutes. Whoa. Wow. I can't finish that one. I've really got to... You know what, guys? Here's one thing I've been trying to figure out. And that is how to get these comments right here. I want them to show up on screen. I want them to show up, and I want everybody to be able to see them. So if they come back and, like, if we break these down into little bite-sized bits, one of these days when we finally get to that, we'll break it down into bits. The comments will be there also, live as they're happening. Pay-per-view, I'd pay to watch that. Let's... yeah... Fundraising for the VA? No. The government gets enough of my money, and I think they get enough of yours as well. Okay, where did we leave off? Catch back up. My mind's got to catch back up to where we were. Okay. It's broken. The VA is broke. This is one idea. I think it's completely off the rails, that is to say. That's one idea. It's an idea. It's thrown out there. It's laughable at best. Just it would never work. It wouldn't work at all. The only real way to fix it is completely and utterly shut it down and start over from scratch. You're basically saying that we're going to put you out there mixed in with everybody else. It's going to massively increase what us individuals are already paying. You think doubling or tripling your healthcare costs now? Wait until you start getting mixed in with a group of veterans. It's just, nasty. I think that guy was just trying to meet an article quota or something over at Cato Institute. That's crazy. Crazy. What else do we have lined up for tonight? Oh, the Dakota Access pipeline. That's right. You know, the whole sit-down, standing rock type thing? Okay, where are some of the facts in all of this? And this, I stumbled on this one over at the Daily Signal. You can get there from Heritage also. And the whole idea was that they're laying out the facts that nobody is reporting on. And they kind of titled it the Dakota Access Pipeline Facts We Aren't Supposed to Know. So, what is it? It is a 1,100-mile pipeline that's going to deliver as many as over 500,000 barrels of oil a day from northwestern North Dakota through South Dakota and Iowa. And it's going to connect to existing pipelines in Illinois. They say that this will do the job more fairly and more safely than the current method, which is transporting it by rail cars on a train. Okay, that over 750 some rail cars transport this stuff daily. This is going to be far more safe than that. So, protesters, they say that they object to the pipeline being close to water intake of the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. However, this should be of no concern, as it will sit approximately... Okay, so here's one of the facts that I didn't know until coming across this article. It's going to be 92 feet below the riverbed, with increased pipe thickness and control valves at both ends of the crossing to reduce the risk of an incident. Okay, 92 feet below the riverbed. I don't know if any of these Indians already know this, but there's oil down there already. So if they're upset at the wrong people. I get that, Army John, that the pipeline protesters are all paid. They're just Soros employees. I get that. So even if it were a risk, Standing Rock will soon have a new water intake that is nearing completion much further downstream near Mobridge, South Dakota. So these guys are already getting a new water intake that's going to feed the reservation. Oh, hello, McFly. The Army Corps consulted with 55. Okay, so whenever you want to sit down and try and do something, what do? You get all the parties involved, or as many as you can, and you try and talk about it. Well, the Corps did exactly that. They consulted with 55 Native American tribes at least 389 times. after which they proposed 140 different ways to route this pipeline to avoid culturally sensitive areas in North Dakota. Now, the original pipeline was always planned for south of Bismarck, despite false claims, Bismarck, North Dakota, that is, despite false claims that it was originally planned for north of Bismarck and later moved, thus creating a greater environmental danger to the Standing Rock Sioux. The real reasons for not pursuing the northern route were that the pipeline would have affected an additional 165 acres of land, 48 extra miles of previously undisturbed field areas, and an additional 33 water bodies. They've given this so much thought and planning and careful calculating that the route that they're taking is far less of an environmental impact than going a different way. It would, they go on to say that it would have crossed zones marked by the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration as, quote, high consequence areas, and would have been 11 miles longer than the preferred and current route. They've already given all this thought into the environment and protecting it and this and that, and trying to minimize any type of risk. Well, get this. Protesters who claim to be gathered for peaceful prayer and meditation, law enforcement has been forced to arrest more than 400 in response to several unlawful incidents, including trespassing on and damaging private land, chaining themselves to equipment, burning tires in fields, damaging cars in a bridge, harassing residents of nearby farms and ranches, and killing and butchering livestock. The recent vandalization of graves in a Bismarck cemetery and the unconscionable graffiti marking on the North Dakota column at the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C. are examples of how protesters' actions do not match their claims of peaceful demonstration. And this goes back to what was said earlier. These guys are paid protesters. They're just causing a ruckus. And John's got a great idea. Why can't they use that machine why can't they use the tunnel machine that they use to bore a subterranean tunnel like they did between England and France? Great idea. It worked. Oh, anyway. You know what? We're going to take a break. I realize I know, 2 breaks in one night. We've managed to squeeze them in. But I'm checking the time. We've got to save enough for Profiles in History. And when we come back, that's exactly what we've got planned. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
Conservative in a world of liberal.
The Stafford Voice.
All right, we are back. And I got to get this lined up. Here we go. Okay. Your favorite segment of the show, and probably arguably mine as well. It is that time. Profiles in History. While being held prisoner by the British, he wrote a parody of God Save the King called God Save the 13 States. Thomas Hayward Jr. was born on July 28, 1746, in St. Luke's Parish, South Carolina. He was the eldest son of tobacco planter Daniel Hayward, having been stuck with Jr. to distinguish himself from his uncle. When the time came, he was shipped off to study law at Middle Temple at Cambridge University in London, England. 5 years later, on May 25th, 1770, he was admitted to the bar. Over the next few years, he would spend it touring England before returning back to South Carolina and starting his practice. rising quickly in the political ranks. On April 20th, 1773, he married Elizabeth Matthews. From the South Carolina General Assembly, Hayward was selected as a delegate to the Continental Congress in 1775. He arrived in Philadelphia with enough time for the debate on independence, voting in favor for and later signing the Declaration of Independence in August 76. In addition, he stuck around long enough to also sign the Articles of Confederation in 1778. Now, upon returning home, he acted as a circuit judge and served in the State House of Representatives. In addition to that, he joined the South Carolina Militia in 1779 and was a captain of artillery. During the successful defense of Port Royal Island, in which General Moultrie defeated the British, Hayward received a gunshot wound that would only leave him with a little scar. The British, however, meant business and laid siege to Charleston and looted Hayward's large estate. When Charleston finally surrendered on May 12, 1780, he and fellow signer Edward Rutledge were rounded up with many others and sent to prison in St. Augustine, Florida. As a prisoner, Thomas was more under house arrest than being locked up in chains. The prisoners, who had to give their promise not to escape, could walk around town and lived in a large house with a garden and orange grove. However, reportedly, one of the worst things they had to deal with while there was the, quote, smelly water they had to drink. Roughly a year later, in July 1781, they received news that they were going to be exchanged for British prisoners. Now, according to some resources, at the July 4th banquet being held included a rousing rendition of God Save the King. The prisoners' version, however, had lyrics that were a little more revolutionary appropriate, they say. Lyrics that Hayward wrote entitled God Save the 13 States. On the way back to freedom in Philadelphia, Thomas Hayward almost died, falling overboard. He clung on the rudder until they were able to pull him back aboard. Awaiting his arrival was his wife. However, their reunion only lasted about a year. On August 16, 1782, she passed away after giving birth a few days earlier, and sadly their baby boy lived only 2 months. Well, when the British finally left Charleston, Hayward returned home, mostly to work on restoring the family plantation and getting into agriculture, where he was one of the founders of the South Carolina Agricultural Society and in 1785 became its first president. On May 4th, 1786, he married his second wife, Elizabeth Savage. Now, afterward, he served as associate law judge for South Carolina and later served as a delegate to adopt the South Carolina State Constitution in 1790. In 1799, Thomas retired, withdrawing entirely from public life. On April 17, 1809, Thomas Hayward Jr. passed away in St. Luke's Parish, South Carolina, at the very same family estate where he was born. Later, Benjamin Rush said of him, quote, "He was a firm Republican of good education and most amicable manners. He possessed an elegant political genius which he sometimes exercised with success upon the various events of the war." Unquote. And that is this week's Profiles in History. Okay. That's how we're wrapping up tonight. If you want to stick around for the After the Show, you have to be watching over on the YouTubes. And unfortunately, that is all the time we have for this week, and God willing, the Stafford Voice will be back next week. You can follow me over on the Twitters or on Gab at Stafford Voice, or you can look me up on the Facebooks, the Instagrams, the Snapchats, wherever your social media preference of choice is. All you got to do is just search for the Stafford Voice, and we're probably going to be there. Also, email your questions, comments, or concerns to thestaffordvoice@gmail.com. If you haven't already done so, please head over to thestaffordvoice.com, sign up for our monthly newsletter. We've resurrected it from the archives. We are doing the newsletter again. The first resurrection per se, went out earlier. It went out a couple of days before Thanksgiving. I'm sorry you missed it, but please sign up over at thestaffordvoice.com. Sign up for our monthly newsletter for some stuff you probably won't see or get anywhere else. It includes a personalized note from yours truly. Also, again, I genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, want to thank you so much for your time. And until next week, thanks and God bless.